Welcome back to another pristine productions here. I'm your mixing engineer extraordinaire, Andrew Rayburn. I want to shout out to all the fans. Shout out to all the subscribers. Shout out to all my support. Remember, you can hit me up, through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Also, check out my website. Link in the description right here, where you can buy rhythms. You can buy my mixing course. I have the dancehall mixing course out now. Be sure to check out my website. And today we have a very special mixing tutorial. Today we were talking about Pro 808 mixing like Kiana Lede. A lot of people may struggle with the 808, and they're not sure how to get certain things to be sounding. Sometimes they overdo that 808 bottom. So I'm going to show you some advanced techniques here, how we get that sound, like what you hear in Kiana Lede song. So let me jump right into this rhythm here that I'm playing here. And you can hear that bass pumping. So let me get right down into it. So let me get into it. So we have some very basic instruments here. I have the kick drum here. I have the snare drum. Let me unmute some of the effects. And then of course we have the 808 here. Let me bring in the auxiliary channels here. So let's get, I'm going to turn off the processing and we're going to talk about. So the 808 here. Now the 808, a lot of engineers, sometimes a lot of producers, upcoming producers or beginners may be struggling with it at the time. How do you get the 808 to be popping? How do you get the 808 to translate in the mix? It is true, a lot of people use sidechain, a lot of people use distortion, but I'm going to show you a way, not the sidechain mode, and I'm going to show you how we get the 808 to be pumping. But the first thing we did, I'm talking about the kick here. I have a SSL channel strip here on this kick here, and I'm boosting a little bit of, a little bit of low end here, about 50, about almost 8 dB there, rolling off a little bit of low end, just so we can have the kick. People may say sometimes, oh, you got to let one win, you got to make the 808 win and leave the kick alone. No, we can let both win. And let's say then this is not the sidechain technique you've been hearing a lot on YouTube. So I'm going to turn off my plugin processing here and let you hear what's going on with this 808. So this is the 808 by itself here with no process. Pretty okay 808. So the first thing I did, you want to make sure you treat your 808. Sometimes 808 may come with a lot of bottom end. Sometimes 808 comes with no bottom end. So what I did, I rolled off a little bit of a bottom end here, and I'm going to show you a technique that I did here. If you can hear that kick is not getting in the way of the 808. 808 is not getting in the way of the kick. So what I did here, I rolled off 50 kilohertz from the 808. You might say, no, Ray, you got to leave the bottom end. Not necessarily if it has too much bottom end. If I unmute the the EQ here, I'm gonna get a extra weight here. So I want to clean up a little bit of a low end there. So also I'm taking out about 2 dB at 50. Why I'm doing that? Because on my kick drum, I'm actually boosting 50, about 7 dB. So I'm creating that, I'm cutting that space there so the kick and the 808 can be as one. but we want that big 808 like Kiana Lede. So I've created a bus. So we've treated the 808 here. We've removed a little bit of low end here. We've dipped out a little bit of 50 so the kick drum can occupy that space so we don't have no clash. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you don't have to do that, depending on the samples that you're using. So you got to use your ears as a discretion. So I created a bus here, and we want to affect the top end of the 808, because if I play this 808 and look at the spectrum here, there's hardly any little to no mid-range area here on the 808 here. So about 500 go up. There isn't any mid-range there, and we need some mid-range to get more of that 808 wide feel there. So I open the bus, and I'll be sending a copy of the 808 to this bus here. So the first thing I did, I added an EQ. Now this is a copy of the 808. We're removing the bottom end from this 808 here. And I'm going to play it, see if I can play it by itself here. I'm going to mute all the rest here. So we're removing the bottom end from the 808. EQ off. You're barely hearing it, but I'm going to show you a trick here. So I'm removing the bottom end from the copy, because we don't want two copies of the same bottom end. We already have enough bottom end on that 808, so we want to remove it, because this is going to be the grit. I call this 808 grit channel here, because we want to affect the mid-range. You might say, Ray, how can we affect the mid-range when there's no mid-range in the 808 first? Through, but we're going to create that. So took off a little bit of bottom end there. It don't have to go too high, you know, just, you know, if this had mid-range, then it would have been much better as well, but I'm going to show you the tricks here. So we have that. I'm going to play the 808 here. Now I'm going to come to that bus, and I'm going to go to my plugin here. Here's the vintage amp from a soft tube here. So I'm going to be using these vintage amps to give me more grit, more distortion, to get that 808 sound. So I'm going to turn on the soft tube here. I'm going to play off, on. I can move the mic around and get some, you know, some vibe. I'm turning up the mid-range here on the EQ, but that wasn't working for me, so went to the second one there where I hear a little bit more definition in the 808. I'll go to the third one here, which is pretty low, although I'm moving the mic around here. On the control is just pretty much volume and tone. When I switch to the second amp, I can really hear that 808 really defined here. And check this out. Up here, you're not seeing much mid-range above 500. Now that we've added the second plugin on the channel here, which is the vintage amp, to create that more room and that distortion, I'm going to turn on the third EQ and check this out here. Now we have mid-range leaking about 500 up here, and this is what we want. Now I also went ahead and boosted about 500 to get even more tone from that 808. So if I play the kick drum here, so let's turn them off again. So that's why we started. Hardly any 808 mid-range here. We took out the low end on the second copy. We've added more mid-range with the soft tube amp, and we turned up the mid-range all the way up here, so we can get that more mid-range definition. And we boosted even more, so we can get that 808 definition. Now out of that track there, I've added a bus so I can get both the dry 808 and the grit 808 version here onto this bus. So I'm going to go on that bus, and the first one is the slate tape machine here. So we're not done yet. We want that big bottom end sound. Now we're getting the mid-range, that nice gritty mid-range, but want more bottom end as well. So I'm going to turn on the slate digital here. So the tape machine is going to saturate. I'm setting this to bias to low, so we want to affect the lower mid-range frequency and get that more definition, natural sound in 808. You want a little bit more body without boosting too much, because you can use the EQ to boost bottom end, but we already had the 808 already controlled and defined, so we don't need to boost anything else. You know, it's good when we use saturation to do these. So I'm going to turn on the tape machine here. Let's bypass that. Bypass. On. So we're getting that a little bit more bottom definition here. But we're not done there as yet, so I'm going to move down to R bass, which a lot of y'all know about R bass. So I'm going to be affecting 50 kilohertz here, and giving it a little bit more bass harmonics here, which is going to sound a little bit more fuller. Because for this particular 808, I don't want to be using the EQ to boost. I want it to, it's already defined, so I want to get a little bit more body just with natural harmonics here. There's a difference by using EQ to boost low end, and there's a difference in getting harmonics with the harmonic saturation plugin. So, and if you checked on our previous setting here, we were rolling off up to 50, so we're going to push back that 50 in there, but with harmonics. So let's engage the R bass here. Off. On. And I can move the frequency around, but we want to affect more of the bottom there. And this brings us to our second EQ here, which I'm rolling off a little bit of 49 here, just so we don't overdo the lower bottom end harmonics here. I'm taking out a little bit of 178. I'm going to show what I'm taking out there. That's right there. There's a little note that strays away there. I'm just pulling that out a little bit. Finally, I'm going to use the SSL bus compressor to get a little bit more volume, a little bit of control here on the 808. Off. On. And now I can bring in the second synth bass. And pro tip, guys, if you're using synth bass, you want to take off the low. I'm removing a lot here. I'm taking up to like 226. If I take EQ off, I'm going to be getting a lot of rumbling on the synth bass. The 808 is already doing that. So I want to remove the bottom end and boost a little bit mid-range to get a little bit more grit on the synth bass as well. Bring in the synthesizers. Let's turn off the plugin process. Let's turn it on. And we're getting good low end from the kick drum at 50 kilohertz here. We did a boost. Remember, we're not side chaining anything here like a lot of these guys show on YouTube, which nothing is wrong with that. You can do that if that works for you, but this is a more balanced way of how I treat some of the 808s. Sometimes I may use side chain myself, but this is how we get definition. And by carving a little bit of hole there in the 808, just to make room for the kick there, which works. You know, it's just like 2 dB, so it's not really hurting the 808. We took off a little bit of low end to clean up the 808 here. And then we opened the bus, just to recap. And we created a second copy of the 808. We send that for the mid-range, the grit. So we took out the low end because we don't want to over define the 808 sound. And to bring back that mid-range that we didn't have above 500 kilohertz, we added the soft tube amp room. This little amp here, you might think that the big one would have worked, but the little one is actually kicking up dust. And this is what brought back that gritty mid-range. And we add a second EQ to even bring up more of that mid-range for that 808. Followed by that, we busted that out to a auxiliary track, which we added more body and definition to that overall combined sound with the tape machine set on low. And then we added some more harmonic low end with our bass on the 50 kilohertz area. You might use 60, 70, go up, you know, it depends on the session. And then we added another EQ just to clean up a little bit bottom, keep it tight, and round it off with extra volume on the bus compressor from SSL. So remember to hit me up, guys. Thank you for viewing the page. And send me comments and support what video you want me to do next. Remember, if you want me to mix and master for you, you can hit me up on my email, link in the description. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.